third paragraph. First, basic, the foundation, the way, and also the result. Here, the basic is foundation. Last time, the most important thing in Buddhist practice is to have the proper perception. I emphasize this numerous times. So, in this world, if your thoughts are not proper, actions without thought, or actions that's different from your thoughts, they are difficult to practice. But mostly it is mostly your behavior follow your mind. That's why it is impossible to do something that's against your mind. So last time I told you that even if it's Buddha's speech or Buddha's teaching, you should know what you have learned, and it's important to understand what has been taught, what is the content. In one dimension, there's no other Buddhism that follows idolatry just like Buddhism. But it's not only the belief in idolatry, but also there's a superstition and blind faith. And also we believe we do not believe in those blind faith. That's why we are in a very complicated state. So if we do not respect, then we cannot enter into a proper path. And if we cannot enter the proper path, then it's very difficult to enter into our destination or reach our destination, because we will be moving through the different way. So what we are going to trust, and also what Buddha has taught us, and also how do we have to practice, and for which reason do we practice. It's very important to know them in detail. So first, foundation, the way, and also the result is very important that we study them first. So the foundation here is the fact of the phenomenon or the reality. If we use another word for the foundation, then it is a proper perception. So after attaining nirvana, whether it's the analysis or whether it is a saint, they follow Buddha's teaching and they study, and when they have attained the status of a saint, they analyze and so after understanding them, it's good to analyze. So we are talking about the status of the phenomenon or the reality. So what we speak and listen and understand those phenomena. If we say in a very simple way, the nature of what we are doing right now. If we say it doesn't change, but then we know that they change. But the fact that they change is something that doesn't change. So the method of existing in this world is all voidless, so everything changes. So looking at the perception this way, and it is also void, and there's also no form, and everything comes with the relation and everything goes with the relation. And also looking at life in this way, and so that's why we know it is void, and that's why holding on to it is and also changing. And because we try to hold on to it so that it doesn't change, when it actually changes, we suffer. So it's very important to have a proper understanding of those. By following the method that's based on this, we achieve our consequence. So, if the basis of the evaluation is wrong, then the evaluation also gets wrong. So we know the saying that everything is evil from the by nature, and so through the education, if we try to make it virtuous, it seems like it's true. But then, if we say the human nature is evil by nature, then can we make it good or virtuous? Can you turn the wood into a steel? So if the basis, but also if you look at the other way, if human nature is virtuous by nature, but through the living, it became evil, and so we need education. But if you say by nature, if you say by nature, it means it doesn't change. So if you also follow what they say, that the world is full of so many people or so many conditions which cannot change. By nature it is bad, by nature it is good, or by nature it was neither good nor bad. So in a simple way, it looks like that's correct, but that's also incorrect. And why is it incorrect? It becomes situation so that it is neither this nor that. So, but if we say the situation nor bad, neither good has not been formed, it has been said once. A living organism, a bacteria, when first created, because it doesn't have brain, it does not even have the instinct to survive. The bacteria just lives. And at the time, there is no classification of evil nor virtue. It's almost like that. So, if the basis is not wrong, or if accurate analysis has been done, then we can also figure out. It seems like science. You know, the Ebola in Africa. Without knowing what kind of virus that is, only if the virus is confirmed and also is how it spread is confirmed, then only we will know how to cure it. And then why do we do that? Because the basic it is done in order to provide a basis. This virus, that kind of virus, and if the basis is given, then what can we do? Then we can also invent the method to cure it. Followingly, if we just say that Buddhism is possible if we only practice, but that's not true. All the teachings of Buddha, they all have the facts about how to survive in this world. And so based on the reality of survival, and the method is also given. But then the religion which believes in God, they do not have it. There is no method to properly analyze the basis. So if we say that God created, then there is no method to prove that the God created this and the God existed yet. And therefore, they cannot provide another method to make it possible that it existed before. But Buddhism is very scientific, even if we analyze with today's science. It is the same as how we prove the science. It's not actually true, but we can actually say that the science is our method. So Buddhism until today in whichever method that we followed, we also believe that it is possible to do it through this way, but we also had the method that if you do that, then that's also not possible. So if you have a pessimistic idea and if you oppose to something, then you can, by opposing, you can go to virtuous path. But also, there's another way to be virtuous and follow the right path. So you have to follow both methods. Because of this, it doesn't follow the laws of relation, so it is incorrect. And because of that, it is correct. It should be so. Is it correct that beans are born from the bean seed? It is correct. If you plant the beans, you cannot harvest the red beans. You can classify this way. It's very simple, isn't it? But you drink, and if you get drunk, is it correct? You drink, you don't get drunk. Is it correct? It is incorrect. You pretend that you're not drunk, but you might fall unconscious. A woman spends a lot of money. Does a house fall? There's no doubt about it. It might seem that it's nothing that you spend a lot of money, but it's almost like this. There's a utensil, and the hole is just like a needle hole. And you might say that because of this needle-like hole, why would the water leak? But because of the small hole, it's just a matter of time, but all the water will leak out of it. So if you say, oh, that person, handsome, rich, and very kind, but still spends a lot of money, that means the rest of the characteristics is all useless. You might also say that although he is so handsome, he spends, why does he act like that? So if the basis is given for sure, and if you know about the basis, then you can also know the method to strengthen it or to get away from it. And in Buddhism, we call it the way, the proper way. Spiritual practice is not just a practice of your heart, but it is existing in a more realistic and a more realistic way. So Westerners might also say that meditation just makes you happy. But in reality, the body, maybe I will also get complained by saying this, but if I say that if you attain certain level at Buddhism, then you might have the white blood. If I say that, doctors might not believe it, and they will say it's a matter of hemoglobin. And I might say is maybe the person suffer from leukemia if I say the person has a white blood. But if you attain a certain status in Buddhism, a bodhisattva, that you have a white blood, and there you convey the Buddhism, and the citizens who are born from it, he has given his neck in order to save the lives of millions of people. It is written in Buddha's teaching, why does the blood turn white? But the scientists nowadays, but it is not, but doctors, they argue against it, but it is not so. It is actually that they have not really a good idea. But After that, Westerners that have practiced this, Milarepa is a very famous ascetic, and he went on. His road was about 5,000 meters above sea level all the time. And if you say Milarepa's cave, it is at least 3,500 meters above sea level. And how would that be in winter? It will be all minus 40 to minus 50 degrees Celsius. It's always snow capped throughout the year, and even in the villages, the snow did not melt. And how did Milarepa walk around? He did not even wear a proper clothes, but he walked around in a sack. And people say it's not possible. It is something like a legend that cannot be believed. But one of the old monks that I have met, all his spiritual energy was open, and he's living in Dharamshala, about 3,500 meters above sea level. And since it's embarrassing not to wear anything, he's just wearing some very thin outer clothes, and he's just covering his important parts of body. But in America, they did some experiment on him, and since the energy is open, and if the heat is conveyed outside his body when they checked, what do they have to do in order to provide the certain temperature? They have to make the whole house into a fridge. And so even when they reduce the temperature of the room to minus 30 degrees Celsius, the body temperature did not decrease, even if after 1 or 2 hours. If we say something like that, then people also might argue, how can there be someone like that? So I'm not telling this in order to tell you something mysterious, but the change of our heart is inevitably happens together with the change of body. So the practice of the heart, you might wonder that it is a separate practice from your body, but it is not something that can be separated. Although we separate this and talk about it, but we cannot separate them. Even you, when your body is comfortable, then your mind is comfortable. But if your mind is uncomfortable, then what happens to your body? The Westerners, until some time ago, even just before the psychology developed, they thought the mind was zero, and they thought it was separate entity that exists. And it was not long ago that they started acknowledging that the body and the mind exist together. But in Buddhism, we accepted that 6,200 years ago. So the practice of mind, is not separating from your practice of your body. If you strengthen your spiritual energy, then your body will also strengthen. If you if you concentrate your mind, then your body can also concentrate. Therefore, they are so loud. Maybe they can also do the teaching. They are more loud. So if the basis of the spiritual practice is just made up mentally, then although you follow the actual practice method, we cannot say it has a potential to change our heart. So in other way, it means you have just become happy. And what do the Westerners say? Through the meditation, there will be alpha from your body, and your body becomes comfortable. And those situations we can also control with our chemicals. And they have actually tried that, but it is also not very successful. It does not last long. And so, if possible, also through the strength of our karma, we have to change it. we have to change it, and that's the practice. So when we say we change our mind, when we transform our mind,
본인이 바꾸어 나가는 것이 이게 수행이라. 그러니까 내 마음을 전환한다. 그 전신이라 그래서 바꾸어 나간다.
but normally people they try not to change and they try to
바꾸어 나가는데
hold on to the present condition, but
묵직하려고만 하는 게
the practice of our mind is that we try to strengthen it so that we are happy. A lot of people have the placard saying that the practice of mind, but they cannot even analyze what is mind. And how can they practice it if by the concentration they have some image, but that is not true.
실체가 어떤 것인지 분석도 하지도 못하는
It is not possible with that. The first condition to change mind is to change the evil heart into a virtuous mind. You do not have to sit with your cross-leg to do that. But if
악심을 선심으로
if an evil person sits there and with a cross leg and try to practice, you will become more evil. So how do the mind exist and how do you have to change? And
한다 그러면 그건 더
how does the analysis become a proper fact? If you do not have the proper understanding of it, then the method itself is all a lie and things are all wrong. And that's all just imaginary.
한다고 앉았는 것들 전부 다 거짓말.
So the very basic of the mind practice is to change the evil heart into a virtuous heart, isn't it so?
그 마음 수련의 가장 기본이 악심을 선심으로 바꾸는 거 아니에요, 그죠?
It means to change. And we say that's a transformation.
그러냐 안 그러냐?
Transformation of the heart and also the body.
바꾸는 거란 말이야.
So by having the evil heart, and if you have been persistent, rather than that, if you change your mind, you become way more happy. You and I both become happy.
선한 마음을 했을 때 훨씬 더 행복해진다는 뜻이야.
But we do not know that basis, and we do not know the exact heart. But we are just into a method of the stereotype method. And so how many times do I prostrate in a day? And if he asks why do you do that? You say, oh, you give me some different reason. And then it shows that your method and the basis and also the consequence is wrong. And what will be the outcome? There will be no outcome.
잘못됐고 하는 방식
You'll just have more problem with your knee.
결과가 어떻게 나오겠어? 아무 결과 없어. 무릎 관절염만 또 오겠지.
This is very good quality. I could record very well. Compared to the recorder before, it was so good so that I could even hear my sound,
옛날 녹음
my own sound.
살 때 어떻게 성능이 좋은지 내 코 훌쩍한 것까지 스테레오로 다 들려.
This is real, and since it is real, 4-5 years ago, thousands of scientists got together,
때문에 4-5년 전에
and they themselves said meditation is science.
의심병 환자들 짝배기 같은 들이 모여가지고
The actual practice of Buddhism is actual science. It is actual. If I feel a little comfortable spiritually or mentally, it is not so.
그냥
But actually, your body changes.
사람을 느낀다. 또 뭐
Although we say your body changes, doesn't mean the person with a small nose becomes big nose. When we say change, the important hormones in our body changes, and depending on the thought and also depending on your karma, things change. That's why our boxers, when they box for a long time, they have to win after attacking someone. So they have a lot of hormones, bad hormones in the body. And so if they quit boxing, then their face also becomes not so healthy, and they also have a lot of different disease. Even the athletes, those those sports player without any competition, they might help, but those who try to hit someone and win over someone is not really beneficial to them. So if you try to win your husband, then you yourself feel bad, right? Even when you want to cheat your husband, you start feeling bad for yourself. And that's why, is it your loss or is it your husband's loss? Then why do you do that? There's no need to do that.
그러니까 윤감님이 손해요, 지가 손해요. 그 짓을 왜 해?
But so you say, oh, this time a medicine seller came and he said it was on sale, so I bought it for $30. First they asked for $500. So since it's promotion, I cut into half and again, and I bought it. But actually, you paid $100.
반 자르고 뭐 반의 반을 자르고 저쪽 해가지고 샀다고. 실제로는 10만 원 주고 샀다.
Consequently, even the enlightenment and also other consequences, they become something that cannot be explained. If we say the basis is wrong, or if the basis is wrong, then even the consequence is wrong. So we need the actual facts. And in order to solve them, you also need accurate method. And since you did that, there will be an accurate consequence. And Buddha said, since those kind of conditions are given, nirvana is actually true. You can actually obtain nirvana.
미르바라는 것이 열반이라는 게 실제라는 말이에요.
Stages of Buddha have different characteristics, and these characteristics arose due to different conditions and different conditions depending on the spiritual practice. The power of Buddha, the 10 supernatural powers, and also other characteristics are already intent in you, but due to individual characteristics, they will develop. So without the base or without the background, there can be nothing. So you should not say from the rock or mountain you can actually gain omniscience. We say Buddha has attained a lot of different supernatural powers, so 6 supernatural powers: the power to see, the power to hear, and the power to read. And all these powers, you cannot just say they arose out of nothing. When we say the glass, when you are making glass, after boiling them, it is not just a glass. And after making the glass, if you paint it, it becomes the mirror. So Buddha, when he said Buddha was able to see everything regardless of distance, then there were numerous conditions, but the very basic condition was that there was a samadhi, and because of that, there was nothing that was obstructing him. Spiritually, there was nothing that was blocking him. But us, spiritually, we have so many distortions, and we have so many different wavelengths. But it did not happen to Buddha. Therefore, depending on the consequence, there were supernatural powers. When something happens, on top of that, there is a supernatural power, but it is not something special. So we actually use the term development. When I have become so, my abilities expand, but it is not something that someone gave it to me. Therefore, we have fully developed the potential capabilities which are already intent in us. It does not happen on a fine day out of nothing. It is even same as Buddha's 10 powers.
뭐가 툭 튀어나오는
It is a very important stage to inspect the base.
부처님이 10가지
You have to identify it from simply from something that simply arose from your mental
지적인 조작에서 생긴 습관을 구별을 해야 합니다.
mental control.
그냥 단순히
To prove the basis, it means to give another definition to the essence and also the law of reality. So when we say we inspect the real, the nature of the reality, it is a very subjective thing.
초가 비춰지만은 굉장히 어려운 문제인데
Everything changes,
존재의 속성들을 갖다 정확히
and therefore they do not have
속성은 아까 내가 얘기한 대로 전부 다 변화하는 것이다.
they do not have their own
전부 다 변화하는
they do not have
자성을 갖고 있지 않다.
their own self characteristics, and through them, if you inspect them, if you inspect the foundation or the basis,
갖다 기초 근거
see, it is not something that just because you talk with someone it happens so, and so you can just trust on this. But
그러니까 그냥 그런 것이다.
just like it's written in the Bible, the God created. When you think about how did the God create, and if they say you have no faith, that's why you cannot believe, then it becomes nothing. And also,
해보려고 그러면 야이 자식아 믿음이 없이 의심을
and also if you say, oh, there was an initial chaos, and from the chaos, the earth divided into two, and there was yin and yang, and it divided into 4, 8, and 24. They say this, but you have to ask why. Why did that happen? But they are not able to answer.
이런 얘기를 하는데
And because of that, even the method of practice is very vague.
그러니까 독일은 수행 방법이
They say they have become the God and went to heaven.
말이 어려고
The body became the God and went to heaven. Maybe if you use a binocular, then maybe there is someone who is hanging around in the sky. But
몰라 망경을 보고
those useless sayings, a lot of people say them. That's because they have not done the
그런 이제
objective investigation. But
흑한적인 검증을 갖다 하지를 않고
if you do not have, if you do objective inspection, then with the subjective inspection, it does not really say.
주관적인 검증을 갖고는 안 되는 거야.
Some might say, oh, this person could be in a very high position.
굉장히 높은 사람인가 보다.
But then if a pop comes and says something else, then you say they have a different saying.
옳은 말을 했나 이 말이 틀리구만.
If a pop comes and says something, and if the other person is very kind, and if they are equal, then as a human being, they should all be the same. Then does it mean that pop is not a human being? That means until so far they have not done the right thing. They have worn the hat, and they were carrying the stick, and as if they are the that they are next to Jesus, and they are the messenger of God. They have been doing bad. They have been doing wrong until so far, and now only they started becoming closer to people. What does it mean? There is nothing. If you are being touched by that, I don't understand. I think now only you are coming back to your senses. There is actually nothing.
그걸 감동을 받는다고 나 웃기는 그래. 이제 제정신 좀 돌아오네. 아무것도 아니에요.
I was hoping that maybe that person would come and say something very important, but they have not said anything about their mistakes, and they only talk about they have kissed the ground.
이제도 아니고 저거들 잘못한 거는
When I saw it, I thought it was really nothing.
무슨 뭐 땅에다
Oh, we have cooperating in killing thousands of Jews, and we apologize to that. And I was hoping that he would say something like that. Isn't that something that a person should do? Because of their grave, if so many people were killed,
그게 사람이 해야 될 일 아닌가? 자기네 단체로 인해서 600만이 학살당했다.
if they are one of the cause to the death,
죽이게 한 원인의 하나다라고 한다고 그게
and
자기가
they should say something like 6 million Jews were dead because of our mistake, and we apologize to that. And because of that, even the Korean War should not happen. And we kill thousands of people in South America, and we built our own church there. And I am really sorry.
잘못되고 남은 교회를 갖다 다 때려 부시고 거기에다 성당 지어놨어.
And we try to rebuild the church of the Red Indians. They should do something like that. From the Crusade War, so many people died, and I have a great repentance to that. If they do that, and also the witch hunt, they kill about 8 million people, and they have burned to them that, and I feel very bad. Ever since when I see the fire, every time when I see the fire, if they say something like that, then I would say, oh, I would accept that he's a great person.
다 죽을지 몰랐어. 오범절인데 그런 소리를 한다 그러면
But they don't even know what they have done wrong, and they are only hiding behind the group, their own association.
뭘 잘못했는지도 모르고 조직 위에 들어치.
That's also a matter of cheating.
그 중생을 속이는 일.
But without knowing the exact cause as per the reality, if we do not know the cause, then we will eventually fail. Even the doctors, if they don't know the actual cause, they also go through a lot of difficulties. They would give them IV, and try to lessen their suffering.
그럼 우선은 링게를 꽂아놓고
But without the cause, they cannot just give any medicine or that medicine.
그렇게 하는 거 아니에요, 그죠?
If the cause is wrong, there can be no method.
이 약도 찍어 투입하고 저 약도 투입하고 그럼 되겠어요? 이게 안 되잖아.
Even in our daily life, I gave you the example of drinking as the basis. So drinking as a basis of my wrong habits. If I am not clear about that, then there's no way to quit it. Without understanding that the basis is wrong, we cannot quit it.
이게 전제가 잘못됐구나.
You understand?
전제로 하지 않고서 끊을 방법이 없단 말이야.
You should not argue that omniscience comes from rocks or mountain. I believe the Letterman hasn't said this, but I will give example. Compared to Korea, monasteries on TV, since this rock is sacred, all these things are very untrue.
뭐 선전 나오고
How can the rock be sacred?
해서 개역 같은 소리 하지.
Because the mountain is also full of spirits.
파이가 영험은 바위가 왜 어찌 영험은?
Because this rock and mountain is sacred and this is spiritual. How can it be so? If that's so, then when people try to cut down trees, then it's almost like cutting their body. So they will try to kill all the people. So even nowadays, they have so many gods, about like 3,333 gods, so many different gods.
신이 하여튼 세 보니까 3,300명.
They also have Hanuman, the monkey god,
신이 하여튼 공무 시작도 신이.
the crocodile god, elephant god.
그래서 신이 많은데 그 무슨 신은 원숭이 신이라고 자꾸 또 무슨 악어 신, 코끼리 신. 이게 말도 안 되는 소리.
So even the statue here,
그러니까
if there was a camera before, then we would have taken the picture of Buddha and
우상을 모시는 것도
And then we can say, oh, that person is Buddha, but at the time there was no pepper, and so
사진을
so there is no one who even drew the picture of Buddha.
될거 아니에요. 그때는 그것도 없었어. 종이도 없고 그런 때니까 누가 종이에다 그려놓은 사람도 없어. 지금 초상을 이렇게 그려가지고.
If we only had even a single picture, then it would have been great, but we don't have it. So, but there's a saying that Buddha was like that. So they just drew just like how we drew General Lee Sun-shin, and they saw carving too, and even the carving,
요즘 이주인 장군 그리듯이 그린 거야.
because they were able to do well in Europe area, so they started carving the sculpture,
히랍 쪽에서
and that became the Gandhara.
그리스 그쪽에 잘하니까 그 신상 조각하는 놈들이 와가지고 어떻게 생겼대? 그 우리가 한번 해볼게요.
So that's just the sculpture being carved, but they say this sculpture is especially sacred, but there's no spirituality in this. So through the statue, you think about Buddha and you practice, and your karma changes, and that is spiritual and that is sacred. So if you prostrate in front of statue, then you have the prayer.
이 불상 앞에서 절을 하면 기도를 하면 뭐
This is a joke, but how can you say that prostrating in front of the statue of Buddha is a very pious act? If I am if I have a very small heart,
아니 내가 좀
then when I saw Buddha sitting there, imagining like that, then if I think about how to become like that person, then that's just that even for a short time you have been blessed, and that's the blessing.
저 양반처럼 좀 돼야 되겠다고 생각을 하면 그 가피를 받은 거야. 잠깐만이라도 가피를 받아. 그게 가피야. 오가피 말고. 오가피 말고.
So you shouldn't be cheated by those things, not even by the names.
그래서
While
그런 데 쏘가
while making the statue, you should think about I should become like Buddha, throwing away all my greed, and I should try to become like him. Then if you do that, then you get you're gaining virtue.
이 생을 갖다가 불쌍을
There's no karma in that. So no rocks or mountain becomes Buddha, not even dogs.
거기에 뭐 신기한 게 있는데
No beings from the hell can also become Buddha. That's why Venerable Yabu has said in the Dharma Sutra that
그래서 야부
the eyes,
그런 얘기 나왔어.
two eyes,
부처님을 어떻게 했던가? 눈은
one nose.
눈은 요렇게 찢었단 말이야. 그지? 눈이
So
요렇게
he just refers to a person.
코는 요렇게
Buddha has eyes with side lines and the nose, straight nose, and walks with 2 feet.
부처는
That's a human being.
찢어졌고 코는 바로
And if you eliminate that cause, then there is no other Buddha. In country like China, they make Buddha.
그걸 제해놓고 부처가
They almost like they make Buddha like a god, but it is not so.
저막 저기 높이 뭐 진짜 신 비슷한 사람으로 자꾸 뭘 만들어 나갔어. 그 이상하게 만들어. 그런 거 없어.
So when you walk around, and if someone tells you, let's go there, if you pray there, your dream come true, and go to a cave, you can do this, and the Buddha over there is sacred. But it is not so.
행행색색이 어쩌고 저쩌고 그게 굴 속에 들어가서 어쩌고 저쩌고 뭐 거기 부처님이 거룩하시고 지부처 거룩한 줄 모르고
But in those places, since it's a very old place, and there are so many students who studied before, so many seniors, so we have a benefit of the place. But you should not make them like a god, and and in those places, it's not like there's a specialty in those places.
그 하나도 없어. 그 뭐 특별히 그게 영업이 특별히 있고 그런 거 없어. 알겠죠? 예? 그래서 그 부처님이 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 그 부
inspecting base is very important process, but you have to identify from the manipulation of the spirits. So
기초를 검증하는 것은 본성과 실체,
proving the basis is identifying the
본성을 검증하는 것은
nature and also the law of the natural law. Therefore,
해석의 여지가 있습니다.
it's a very objective process when we actually say we are inspecting the natural property.
세 가지 기준을 가지고 그걸 해석해야 됩니다. 그러니까
You can you can study the Buddhist teaching depending on their property into so many different explanations.
12가지 패턴으로 해놨어요. 당시 설법을 하는데 제일 크게 구분하는 것은 요의경이라고 여러 번 말씀드렸죠, 그죠? 이거는 뭐냐면 금강경처럼
There are two ways. The first one is a direct explanation of the teaching. The second one is indirect explanation. So if you say you're ugly, without that, you say, oh, I am not handsome. But in other way, indirectly, we can also say, oh, that person has a small nose. But if the person has a complex of ugliness, and to show that it is wrong to have those kind of idea while living, so you say, oh, you look handsome.
사는데 손해다는 것을 갖다
But some also say,
알려주기
I am handsome in many different ways. You say, you are ugly. So you are actually giving them a little sense of reality. That's all subjective.
공주병을 갖다 좀 제거해
In order to remove the evil, you talk about goodness.
얘기란 말이야. 대법이라 그래. 육조스님도 이걸 갖다 이제 대법이라 그래.
To show that the sun will be bright next morning, we talk about darkness in the night. In order to talk about the husband, you talk about the wife. If you only talk about the husband, then the conversation doesn't happen, so you have to talk about wife. If your husband is very angry at home, then we say, doesn't your wife give you food?
남편이 집에 가서 성질을 잔뜩 잘 낸다고 그럽디다. 부인이 밥을 안 해주나? 뭐 그런다든지.
So that's all teaching, subjective teaching. So if you divide Buddha's teaching in two ways, one's direct and the other one is indirect, and all of them have different patterns.
우리가 부처님 보면은 크게 나누는
And
요의경과
and you should not misunderstand when you're talking about the direct teaching or the indirect teaching. All these subjective teachings, let's say,
요의경도 착각을 하면 안 돼. 상대적으로 얘기하는 것은
when we go to Yeongchuk Mountain,
빈비사라 왕이 예를 잘 들었는데 빈비사라
below that the son Asase killed his father. He had kudeta and he killed his father, and he also imprisoned his mother, who eventually died.
자기 아버지를 죽였다.
And after killing,
죽였어. 자기 어머니도 감금시켜서 결국 죽었어.
the disciple and also the cousin Devadatta, who revolted in order to kill Buddha.
대받았다가 부처님
The Devadatta died, and where did he die?
나가서 부처님 쫓아.
He died on Saravasti.
그 대받았다가 죽었어. 죽었는데 어디 죽었냐고 기원정사에서
And he tried to kill Buddha, and
언덕에서
by chasing, he wanted to scratch him with a cobra, and he also applied the cobra poison on his nail and tried to scratch him, but he fell and he killed him. But he fell on the ground and he killed himself from the poison, and he eventually came to know that the other person cheated him, and he had insomnia, and he
얼마나 괴로웠겠어. 그뭐 성곽 위에 막내에 올라가서 혼자서 막 저녁 내 잠을 못 자지. 불면증
and he hit so many pillars, and
나무 그
when he was having mental problem, he even killed those people who were beside him. And in the morning he woke up and he would say, how did so many people die? And they would say, you killed him. But the sound of his cry was heard so far away, and even Buddha could hear that.
이렇게 될 정도였어. 그
he wanted to meet Buddha because he was suffering from all the guilt.
한번 이제 부처님 마음
The,
보고 싶다고
the first one, he said, the Buddha said, you can kill your father and you can also kill mother. If you understand that direct teaching, does that mean it doesn't mean kill your parents?
부처님 말씀에
But this was said in order to console, as I say, whose parents are already dead, and he wanted to put the king into a proper place in order to control the bloodshed in the country. So he wanted to console him, and he said, by consoling, try to calm your mind.
위로를 이제 해주기 위해서
And since you know what you have done wrong, it is more than enough. And
지고
all people in your country treat them like your parents, and you will start paying back your karma. And from that time when he saw all people walking on the street, he came down to the ground from his horse, and he respected them. And when he was ruling, so many old people came from different regions to live in the country.
노인들이 기하급수로 다른 데서 살러 와가지고 뭐라고 이런
And so whatever it was, he tried his best, and even the king paid back his karma. And also the Buddha wanted to make sure that everyone lives happily. So when you listen to Buddha's teaching, you should know that kind of situation and the background, the context, and you should also try to understand. Without knowing the context, you perhaps misunderstand.
말만 들으면 진짜 부처님 뭐 이런 말씀
If you're not able to analyze logically the teaching of the sutras,
그 경전에 가르치면 논리적으로
normally Buddha spoke in a very logical way.
그런데 보통
When you read the paramita, it's also very logical, so that it gives you headache.
뭐 반야부 계통의 경전을 보면 너무
It is so logical that you cannot argue that it is not logical.
그러니까 틈새기를
When it is not possible to analyze in a logical way, then just like before, it's said with some other intention.
논리적으로 분석이 되지 않을 때는
Because of some other target, he should have said that.
하신 말씀이 있어요. 그 불효의 경이라.
And also,
목적이 있어서
the logical opposition. What is logical opposition?
그리고
The essence of the high class, which cannot be argued in a logical way, that's the objection of the logic. When you're talking about voidness, you also spoke about the logical position. For example, when you are discussing about the absolute truth, and if you have found the flaws at the time, you have to understand as per the objective and also the determination what that sutra is trying to teach you.
어떤 허물을 그게 뭐가 좀
So even when the direct teaching, if you think that it is not logical, then Buddha is teaching that with some other intention. It is also there in the Diamond Sutra. Through the question and answer time, there's a time when he used the
수보려고 질문을 하고 주고받으면서 반어법을 쓴 게 있다.
he used the term irony, and he said it's better than filling the whole universe with jewels. Like, is it better? So when things like something like this is said, that's said with some certain goal, and that's why we say it is not wrong.
목적과 의도를 가지고 한 얘기들이란 말이야. 그래서 틀리지 않는
Followingly, when those contents like absence of ego is not very clear, and although you try to guess in a logical way, but if you found the flaws in that, then you do not have to accept that. If amongst the Buddha's teaching, if you are not able to take them in a logical way, or even in other way, then you don't have to take it. Just because it's Buddha's teaching, you do not have to take them
부처의 말씀이라고 해서
compulsorily.
이건 뭐 부처의 말씀이니까 무조건이다.
if you think you're not sure about the
그래서 끈다.
about the motivation,
무슨 의도도
if you feel
확실치 않은
that
것 같다.
despite your teacher's teaching, then it is incorrect.
그 부분에 대해서 이 얘기를 하는데
So
의도도
those
분명히
parts
얘기가 있는 것 같다라고 한다면 맞지 않다.
Buddha has compared the Mount Meru. The
이제 그런
top of the mountain is heaven, and when he was explaining the 6 different stages, he explained that, and it is not actually Mount Meru that does that, but it is just a comparison.
육도윤회 과정을 설명할 때 그렇게 했는데 그게 뭐 수미산 그게 사실이냐고.
Nowadays, depending on the size of the sun and also the movement of moon is very well known. If in the sutras,
태양이 거기
if those kind of informations are being not told in a proper way, or if they differ, then you should not just take it because of the authority.
아까 그
All this information, science and also Buddhism, we have a similar method of approach. So you should not just take them because they are the teachings. We know how the creatures are being born. We know that babies are born, they grow in the womb and they are being born. But
근데 부처님께서 오른쪽이 옆구리로
But in Buddhism, it has been said in the similar way. But in Christianity, they say Jesus does not have a father, and so Jesus was just born with the blessing of the God. Then,
하느님께서 독생자로 네가 태어나라.
if you go to church, I went on a Christmas, and I could not just listen there. I could not bear. And if it was once, I would just listen. But they kept continuing. They continued to say. Imagine how they don't trust, and so they keep saying, even the person was born with a father from his mother, and so I thought in my head that maybe they don't really trust, and it seems like there are very few believers of Catholic. Why is it so? Because they kept continuing to say and re-emphasize.
처음에 캐톨릭 신자가 몇 명 안 되나 보던데.
Because they don't believe, they continue saying that 20 times. With the blessing of the God, and also from the stable,
그걸 갖다 한 20차례
being born in a stable, and also being born on the road, there isn't much difference.
마국간에서 어쩌고 저쩌고 뭐.
It's just a phenomenon that's great. And so they were not born in the hotel and also just a stable. And although they build the stable in a proper way or in a pretty way with a little straws, but it is not really pretty. It's just the horse dung everywhere.
만들어놨다고 뭐 집도 좀 갖다 놓고 구유도 갖다 놓고 이런 거 갖다 이쁘게 만드는데 뭐 이쁘긴 뭐 이뻐 그냥 그
Even Lumbini, if they have the supernatural powers and the baby should be born in the house, why on the road? Because it was on the mountain, because they didn't have any clothes to put on the ground. So they put down the sari and they just made a temporary maternity room. And since there was no bed, they just put down the cloth again on the ground. And since there was nothing to hold, they said the tree came down. There'll be no tree that can come down and put your hand.
깔고 그 잡을 게 없으니까 뭐 나무가 지가 내려왔대.
They said they were holding the tree and the baby came out from side, and some say the C-section, but how can the C-section be performed on the side?
장절개를 해도 왜 여기를 해?
Those kind of things are not fate. It is just their method of recording at the time. But they say they were born from the side.
그거는 이제 그때 당시 기록 방식이란 말이야.
And took a walk, but even the horse, they cannot walk right on from the moment they were born. At least 1 hour has to go by, and they only do that to survive in the prairie. But human, we are the slowest, and it takes us so long to learn to walk.
찰떡이거든 이게. 그런 말을 배우려고 그러면 얼마나 걸려요. 그렇게 오래 걸리는데.
And they tell us to believe that. But if we believe that just like that, it becomes a story that is not true. It is just their method of recording.
믿으라 그러면 참 무서운 얘기가 되잖아요, 그죠? 다 아는 얘기인데.
At the time, they say since he was a royal that belongs to the king's family, he was born from the side. And we say 박혁거세 was born from an egg, but he's not the bird. It is just their method of recording. He wasn't born from the egg, but he was born from a tribe that took the egg, the hen as the totem. Even when he walked 7 steps, they took in the Sakya family, they took the whole world into number 7. So since he is the king, holding the kid, the adult walks 7 steps, take care of the whole universe, the whole earth. When a child is born, we also say he is someone who will become a mirror. So those recordings, if you just take them word by word, and there will be no one who really trusts, but there is also pursuing something that is not true. So that's also incorrect. So if you look at them in truth, so even if they say Jesus is born from the blessing of the God, just because you say we don't know who the father of Jesus is, doesn't mean Jesus' pride goes down. It just makes him more human, and I think that's better. And also the priest, you should not lie. People like us. So whether it's a lie that I say or whether it's something that someone else tells me to do, and also the lie that happens because I don't know, just you should not do all of them. Just because the Pope tells me that Jesus was born without father from the blessing of God, that's a lie. I wouldn't do even if Buddha tells me to lie. If Buddha tells me to tell the lie, then I would say that's not true. And that's the behavior or attitude of Buddhism. The end.